Welcome to the Focused Fundraiser. This is where I get to discuss how to focus on the right fundraising practices with those that are in the trenches day in and day out doing this work. And so I'm super excited to jump into it today. I am joined by Quam Taylor, who is a leading fundraising strategist in this space. Can't wait to dive into it. And she is also one of our featured speakers at WellTold this April. Sherry pushes leaders to stop chasing events and appeals and start leading with revenue. So if you care about building a stronger revenue engine for your mission, you're going to want to lean in on this conversation this morning. Sherry, welcome to the show. Can't wait to
Hey,
dive into it
Rob.
with you.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So I want to talk about WellTold a little bit, but before we do, give us a little bit of your backstory, share a bit about how you got into the nonprofit sector, all of that.
Yeah. Well, and I'm so excited to come to Fargo. I've never been to Fargo. I'm in Chicagoland. And in essence, I just quickly work with organizations who either want to grow or diversify their revenue. And we really want to do that by securing general operating gifts. So that's a little sneak peek of what I'm going to be talking about at Well Told. But the reason I do that is frankly because when I shifted 15 plus years from my corporate career into the nonprofit sector and was cutting my teeth learning how to fundraise, there were some pretty quick apparent things that I learned. And one of those was really aligning our fundraising hours with dollars. And so I am all about high ROI, general operating gifts that are going to scale and grow our organizations, and doing that through investment level conversations. And so I don't hate events, I don't hate appeals, but I do think there is a higher return and a way of fundraising that frankly secures the revenue we really need to fully fund our organizations.
Mhm. That's so good. We're going to dive
Yeah.
into that together. But oh yeah,
I was
give
just
us a
gonna
little
say,
bit.
and so I didn't totally answer your question because I got excited, but I think like when I shifted into nonprofit, I came out of this hours to dollars mentality because I was in agency life and we build on a 6 minute increment. And so I always laughed that I still look at my phone and I'm like, okay, 106. Like I'm still on this like 6, 12, 18 minute increment. And what that ingrained in me was really making sure that all my hours were used, to the maximum capacity. And so that principle in fundraising that I learned of, or in business that I learned forever ago, I had no idea it would really be driving what I teach and this real hours to dollars mentality and how that really scales and grows organizations. And so when I shifted into fundraising, it only made sense to me to focus kind of at the top of the pyramid and to scale those gifts. And so it's just been a fun journey to use those skills and tools into what I teach today when I really didn't know I was designing the methodology I teach today. But it's been really successful and really fun.
Well, without giving away too much of that methodology, tell us a little about your session. What's a hard truth about fundraising that you plan to challenge everybody at WellTold?
Yeah, so I'm excited to come to the Well Told conference. I mean, mainly because it's about storytelling, and I find that fundraisers are oftentimes only telling half of the story, especially to mid and major level donors, or what I would call like relational investment level donors. And what I mean by that is that we are great as fundraisers talking about problem we're solving, the stats, the crisis, and then moving into and here's how we do it. Here's our model. Here's our solution. Here's our programs. Here's stories of changed lives, and isn't it great? We're all celebrating, and that is so important. I want everybody telling those stories, but our mid and major level donors need more. And so I find that sometimes we stop there because we haven't been trained to really move into the investment level story and the story of like how our organization is growing and how we're funded and how we invest dollars and why somebody should give their best gift to us every year. And so I teach fundraisers how to not, to flow into that investment level story that major donors need to hear, large foundations need to hear so that we are having those transformational conversations. Um, and we're speaking their language, if you will. We're kind of sitting CEO to CEO and having those types of conversations. And so I'm going to talk about that other half of the story that I find that, it's sales training, if you will, but I find that fundraisers simply aren't happening. And sadly, it's just because, they haven't been trained to do it. They've never had the experience doing it, or they're handcuffed by events and appeals and campaigns and all the deadline, urgent driven fundraising things that we do.
I can't wait to hear that. I think that a lot that resonates so much for me. One of the nonprofits that I support, one of the things that drew me to them is that they showed ROI. They didn't just talk about the impact, which was super important, but also the ROI of every dollar you give, you get a 1000% ROI. And they broke down how. I mean, it's very much CEO to CEO or C level, right? I
Yes.
love it. So, who
Yeah.
should make a priority to attend your session at WellTold?
That's a good question. I would say, so of course, executive directors, because even though sometimes executive directors want their fundraising team to do the majority of the fundraising, oftentimes these top level conversations really are they're suited for the ED or the CEO, right? We're sitting CEO to CEO here, and so often fundraising oftentimes is not as successful because of how we are sharing more of the, let's say, like organizational assets, or how do we talk about our budgeted need? How do we walk them through our strategic plan? Those types of things that are they're probably a little bit more suited to the ED. Um, and I should say, and we all know that it's a co-pilot scenario with the development team. And development directors, major gift officers, people who are growing up through the ranks in fundraising and feeling like, how do I really set myself apart? How do I grow? How do I, secure more revenue for the organization I'm passionate about? People who are like, I'd also say kind of afraid of the numbers conversation, or aren't having one-on-one sit downs with donors, this is a perfect session for them.
So good. All right. So for those listening, this is a 1-day conference and towards the end of April. It's both in person and online to attend. If this is resonating with you, Sherry's going to be there talking about this in depth. We also have an amazing lineup of speakers. We've got T. Clay Buck and Crystal M. Cherry and Dana Delval and all these amazing speakers that have expertise deeply into this space that you're going to walk away with uh, making yourself a better leader and a better fundraiser and a better storyteller from this. So links are in the description and the comments. DM me if you need more information, but you're definitely going to want to join this. It's going to be great. And it's going to be in Fargo, which is it's just a blast. So
And I look forward to being in these sessions with people who, I know on LinkedIn, but I haven't been in the room with. So I'm excited to
great.
meet people too.
Awesome. Let's dive into some of your expertise, Sherry. So you talk a lot about, and we already have dove into this, shifting from that transactional fundraising into more of the strategic and relational revenue generation. Break that down for listeners. What does that actually
Yeah.
look like?
That's a great question because, it's so buzzy for us to talk about like transactional to relational, but really what does that mean? Um, I think that, or I would propose that there's a whole nother level of relational fundraising that I would say people are just barely scraping the surface of. And one of the reasons I think I don't know, it's kind of hard for people to make that shift. If their model is not rooted in hours to dollars, it's hard to have the time to move into that relational fundraising that really is more reflective of like that tortoise, or just, yeah, tortoise pace versus the hare pace. But it's critical because 81% of donors, so the majority, to lead those donors to their best gift, build that relationship, eventually be sitting down and asking them to invest, it takes 6 months to 24 months. And I always tell my clients, you've got to let it take that long. That is relational fundraising, to take that time and to build that relationship and actually then be sitting down and asking for that gift. And so often we're just so busy and we got the three events for the year, we're doing the thing and all the submittals that, oftentimes people who could give larger gifts, could be investment level donors, we're asking them through events or through appeals or through campaigns. And a mid or major level donor is never going to give their best gift through one of those transactional activities. They're only going to give their best gift if we have a deep relationship with them and we're sitting down and asking them. And so that solicitation training that, again, so few fundraisers have had is critical. And that is really the difference between kind of that deadline, calendar driven, Marcom, transactional fundraising to true relational fundraising and taking that time and being being comfortable being on that tortoise pace versus that hare pace.
Yeah, and we're really talking about it sounds like you are very much from, like, the for-profit sector, so we're pulling in concepts like, pipeline generation, and so
Yes.
you can't just expect somebody to make a major ask, you have to push them through a pipeline and have an
Yes.
idea of, is that 60 days? Is that 6 months? Is that 2 years? And
Right.
make sure that your pipeline is filled so that you don't try to pull a 2-year into a 3-month conversation and you
Yeah.
lose it because of that, so
Rob, you're so right on this pipeline thing, and I've actually, like, leaned even harder into pipeline generation for my business because I'm just seeing it as such an issue that's keeping organizations from growing. And what I mean by that is, like, sometimes it's like, well, that donor's always given $10,000. Wow, we saw their name on somebody else's annual report at $100,000. But, like, maybe it's November and our fiscal year ends in December. We're like, "Yeah, but what about the 10K? We need the 10K. We got cash flow. We got payroll." And, like, we're almost, like, desperate for the 10K. And so we can't even fathom not securing the 10K that year and, like, "Oh, the 100K seems so far out here." But sometimes that decision to say, "Actually, let's slow it down. What if they didn't give this year, but it actually set us on this pace to get a larger gift?" You can only be confident in pumping the brakes and saying, like, "It's okay if they don't give this year," if you have a full pipeline. Like, if you have 3 names behind each, box on your gift chart, if you will, um, you can only sit in confidence and say, "It's okay if we don't get that gift," if you know you have 3 meetings next week with donors. And so that you just you thank you for bringing up that concept because so often we're just so obsessed with this one donor and hopefully they give for the year and we're just obsessive. And anytime I see people doing that, I'm like, release and go talk to 3 more people because that habit is pipeline. It's a pipeline habit.
I rarely talk about DonorDoc on this podcast because I don't want it to be just a product, but, I mean, that is a reason that we added ask boards into DonorDoc, which
Mm,
is pipeline management. It's you can do your moves management through there or your memberships or your major asks. It's just pipeline gen, and it gives you a total, it gives you the breakdowns and averages, so it's such a huge
amazing.
piece. Yeah, alright. So, you talk about need-based budgeting as well.
Yes.
Which was that's a new concept for me. Can you walk us through how needs-based budget changes fundraising conversations?
Okay. Changes everything. Changes fundraising conversations, changes teams, changes budgets, whole thing. Um, okay, so oftentimes when, like, say I start with a new client and I'll use round numbers so I don't have to do math on any of these conversations. I'll say to somebody, "Hey, what's your budget this year?" And they might say, well, it's 2 million. Okay, great. Um, what do you need? Like, what do you need to be raising to? You have your new strategic plan. Looks like there's a lot of growth initiatives in there. What do you need? And 9 times out of 10, that ED will say, well, that's a squeak by. That's like barely making it. If we really did want to do what's in our strategic plan, wanted to pay our staff living wage, wanted to move into these new initiatives that we're excited about, gosh, it'd probably be 2.5 or 2.4, whatever. And then our strategic plan calls for all this growth. Like, wow, we would really need to be a $4 million organization if we're going to fulfill the plans and the mission that we have. And so oftentimes teams, organizations are not raising to the true need because, like, they're actually raising off the wrong number in the first place. And so I'm gonna use a strong word, hate squeak by budgets. I hate the, like, well, this is last year and a little bit more because that's what then the team is going to raise to. That's what the board is going to raise to, and it's never raising to the true need of the organization. And I find that that's very scary oftentimes for leaders or organizations or fundraising teams to say, actually, no, our need is 2.4. And what would it look like? Back to my hours to dollars concept. What would it look like if we aligned our hours with the dollars that actually yielded the 2.4? And we started doing different things and we started really weighing what do we need to stop doing so we can start doing more higher ROI activities. So So often this number, and it's scary at first when I'm like, oh yeah, 2.4, that's what we're going to raise to. Once you start moving into those activities and, you let your budget really be the compass for where your organization's going versus like, last year a little bit more, it is a game changer in fundraising. And that is scary at first, but it's really fun. Actually happened this morning to like watch a team go, oh, so we actually could be raising to that. Huh, I didn't think of it that way. And so I'm all about the needs-based budget. Tell me what you need. Do you need it or not? Because that is the number we need to anchor to and raise to.
That's so good. Yeah. Everything you
So
just said,
simple though,
it is simple, but it is so important and impactful. Is there a mindset shift that a lot of nonprofits and fundraisers need to go through to make that happen?
Percent. Yeah. Sometimes people will tell me, like when I'm being interviewed to be hired, a board member will say, when does this not work? When does the system not work? I'll say, well, it doesn't work if we stay in scarcity zone. If we stay in like, well, no one would ever do that, or we could never raise to our true need because we've never had that before, or like it is completely a mindset shift to present what you need and ask donors to give to that need. Versus like what we'd like to, well, we're hoping to, we have a new strategic plan and we want to, what do you need? Right? That changes that tone when you're sitting down with these investment level donors and having this conversation we're going to talk about in April of how do we sit down confidently and say, could I walk you through our need? This year we have a $2.4 million need. Could I show you what that looks like? Versus we're hoping we'd like to, if we could, right? Which one of those do I want to invest in as a donor? I want to invest in the plan, the engine, the outcome, the results.
You touched on something too that's so important is the saying no so that you can say yes to the right things. So, I
Yes.
mean, that's why I call this the Focused Fundraiser podcast. It's the hard conversations of we can't do everything well. And so what are the things we're going to do well and say no to the rest? And those are hard conversations, but if you can get if you can get that in your team and the mindset of how your organization works, it's a game changer.
Yeah, you're so right. It's like sometimes I'll say, that was a great activity and it got you here, but it's not going to get you here. So yay, celebrate it. High fives. But like we have to do different things to get to this next level. And you're so right, Rob. Like people have so much trouble ending something. It's kind of funny in the sector. It's like we can start a new idea any day, but like ending something of like, is that one donor going to be mad? Is so hard for people to do. And ending an event that's been going on for 8 years but isn't making any money and is sucking our team dry. It is such a hard decision. But sometimes that's actually the hard decision that has to be made to put you on that new revenue trajectory. So we have to do the math behind all of that and, learn new skills, have new tools to be able to pivot into, stronger things that you're starting for sure.
So I'm curious to know, we're talking, you started with talking about starting from the top down, which is donor segmentation, major donors, mid-level donors, recurring donors, whatever you call them. Uh, how do you tell leaders to know which segments are most important to their org? Because it is different than for every org.
It is different. It really goes back to the math behind it. So let's use our 2.4 example. If this organization is pure charitable revenue, meaning no, federal dollars or earned revenue or stuff like that, I want 50 to 75% of that revenue coming in from relational fundraising. So naturally, that's top of the pyramid. That doesn't mean it's individuals like family foundations who we know Tom and Sue. We have lunch with Tom and Sue. They're a family foundation, a company, a private company who I go sit in the corner office and make that ask. I want 50 to 75% of my dollars coming from those one on one relationships and coming from one on one solicitation. So I always start there. Of course, we still need, pipeline and revenue coming in from monthly or events or one time gifts or campaigns. Of course, we're not getting rid of that. But oftentimes, often this is like really growing, or we have our larger donors giving through that bottom of the pyramid that's really kind of, keeping us from growing. And so we have to have a strategy for every level of the pyramid, but they're very different, right? And there is a plan and a path to those dollars at every level. And so it really goes back to the math, and goes back to are we raising between 50 and 75% of our revenue in this way and with these relationships? If we're not, we either need to look at skills training or time allocations or all of those sorts of things.
All right, Sherry, this has been a fantastic conversation. I always end with what I call the tactical takeaway. So,
Mm,
this is something that fundraisers and listeners can do today. So, Sherry, what is one thing every fundraiser should do
yeah.
today that you believe matters most?
Okay, this is the simplest thing that I'll just say. Pick up the phone and call somebody. And I just, we're so hiding behind these and everything when like why don't we whatever the last gift was that you got, if you have their phone number, just pick up the phone and be like, I was picking up the phone to say thank you. Wow, you knocked our socks off when we went to the mailbox today. Nobody does that anymore. And so my clients that I'm like, just go pick up the phone. Don't hide behind a letter. It's incredible how we can start building relationships because, nobody's doing that anymore. And so I find it actually like this funny thing, even that's a piece of advice I'd give people, but pick up the phone and call.
It's a piece of that's a takeaway from a lot of guests. So you are
Yeah.
not alone, and
Okay,
it's
good.
something that everybody is saying and needs to happen. I agree with you. All right, so if this conversation with Sherry is any indication, you're going to want to hear Sherry live at WellTold in April and hear more of this from her. So make sure you join us there and continue learning from these experts like Sherry. And you're going to walk away not just inspired like many conferences, you're going to walk away with actionable takeaways that you can implement on Monday. So links are going to be in the description for this. Sherry, thank you so much for joining me today. This has been fantastic.
Thank you, Rob. Looking forward to April.
For those that are listening, if you are curious about DonorDoc and how it can help you find clarity and build a strong donor base through smart stewardship, you can visit us at DonorDoc.com to learn more, and we will see you next week.